Hello, this is Kate McMahon, and thank you for joining us today for Profile. I'm very excited to introduce you to my guest today. We have Erica Waasdorp, and she is the president of A Direct Solution. And thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And you're an expert in annual and monthly giving for nonprofits, and I'm really excited to have you here to share your knowledge to pass on to the many nonprofits that we have here on the Cape.
Great.
Now, can you share with us a little bit how you got started in this profession?
So I moved to the Cape 26 years ago from the Netherlands, and I grew up in the Netherlands. I was 32 when I moved here, and I was always in the direct response sphere. So I worked for Reader's Digest, several other publishing companies in Holland, and then when I moved to this country, I married an American. When I moved here, I started working for International Fund for Animal Welfare. So that IFAD. So that really got me introduced to the nonprofit space, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, I already love direct response, like direct mail, you know, knowing how the results are for things that you send out. So that was always really, really exciting to me. And now working with organizations and with people that are passionate about a cause, that was even more exciting. So it was a really good fit. So I really loved it. Yeah. So that kind of opened the door to nonprofits.
That's great. And we do have many nonprofits on the Cape that do great work. And here at the Media Center, we do work with quite a few of them. And the passion is amazing with some of the leaders. So they're fortunate to have you as a resource here on the Cape. So can we talk a little bit about monthly and annual giving, and perhaps start with the difference between the two?
So that's a great question. So monthly giving is part of the annual giving revenue stream, if you will. So annual giving doesn't mean that you only appeal to donors like once. It means all of the annual revenue that organizations need to pay for their operating. So what is it that they need to keep going? That's considered the annual revenue. Monthly giving is part of that, in that it's a way for donors to give on a regular basis smaller amounts. Rather than writing 1 or 2 or 3 checks a year, they might be giving like $5 or $10 or $25 a month. That will also be unrestricted revenue for the organization. They can spend it on however they need to spend it. So it's part of that operating revenue.
Okay, that's awesome. And I actually, it's not called subscribe, but do annual giving. And it seems like it's a lot easier for me. They've got my credit card number, and you barely even notice.
Right. Again, it's just a great way for people to make a difference in a way that's convenient on their budget. So, I mean, I am a monthly donor to, 40 organizations or something like that. So, and I don't, I tally it up at the end of the year and like, oh wow, that was a lot of money, but you don't necessarily even notice it. So yeah, it's a great way to give back.
Right, definitely on a monthly basis. You're right about that. We also mentioned earlier about the sustainer programs and how they may be relevant today.
Wait, so sustainers is basically another word for monthly donors. So recurring donors, I mean, some organizations have a name for the program, like champions or guardians or partners, or lots of different names for the same thing. It's all their monthly donors. But sustainer giving has really grown over the past, especially like I would say 5 or 6 years. So I actually wrote a book on monthly giving called Monthly Giving, the Sleeping Giant. And the reason why I wrote that, I wrote it in 2012, was because there really wasn't anything there yet. And yet I had been working in the sustainer giving space, if you will, for a very long time, because IFA introduced me to it because they had a really good sustainer, like monthly donor program already that they'd started in like the 90s, so 1990s. So that really helped me, and I just was like, wow, this is such a great way for people to make a difference, and this is such a great way for organizations to get that money that they need to keep going. So again, it was definitely a win-win for everybody. Yeah. But because there was no book, I wrote it, and since then, really it has absolutely taken off because it has become a lot easier to give. I mean, everybody now has their phone, their computer. It's a lot easier to just go online and say click give monthly, and there you have it. So
and off you go.
Yeah.
Now, I was fortunate enough to see you speak recently, and you also spoke a little bit about direct mail versus online giving, and that still is viable for organizations.
It's absolutely still viable, and I know. Everybody would love to get rid of direct mail, but unfortunately, it's not there yet. So if you look at the latest statistics, because obviously I track on a lot of statistics out there, and if you look at the latest statistics, last year, 8% of all giving in the U.S. came online. That means 92% of all giving came offline, meaning people write checks and send them in the mail, right? So that's one. The other thing what they have found is that the direct mail piece, or even a postcard or a newsletter, that will drive people to give online if that's easier for them, but they wouldn't have gotten there if it wasn't for that mail piece. So it drives people to give online, right? So that's another big factor that plays a role there. So, and the other piece is like people who give offline and online are actually more engaged donors than those donors that are just giving online or just those donors that are giving offline. So it's really a mix. So the more engaged you can get people to be, the better off you are.
Right. Engagement's a great word because I think about my own giving, and I really like the connection through the direct mail piece. It oftentimes keeps me up to date on what the organization is doing, which helps me feel that my money is being used for good causes.
And the other side of it is like the reality is you can still reach pretty much everybody in the mail. Not everybody has given you their email address, right? So not everybody has given you their phone number.
Exactly.
So it's basically the number one way you can reach people. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. Now, you work with organizations on Cape and off Cape. Is there any difference there, or any hints or helpful ideas that you may have for our audience, which is on the Cape?
Yeah, I mean, I think organization like I said, I work with organizations as far as San Francisco, so DC, New York, all over the map. But I think a lot of the organizations off Cape obviously are like a little bit bigger, so they have budgets that they can use to do more testing. So I think that's a little bit of a hindrance if you look at the average organization on the Cape that may have a few thousand donors, and there's just you can't test a lot, so you just have to go with what's been proven or tested elsewhere, right? So that's where I think I give an advantage by bringing some of the learnings from off-Cape charities and conferences and publications to nonprofits here on the Cape to say, hey, well, here's what a homeless organization did over here. Here's what you could use here. But yeah, so I think the size of organizations is a little bit different here. I think the other thing is that again, because we're all fishing in the same pond, I mean, it's like what 250,000 households on the Cape, and then if you add the islands to it. So there's a lot of competition, if you will, right? So again, you really have to stand out. But on the other hand, I think a lot of people on Cape Cod that are here, living here year-round, and even the visitors, they are very committed. They care about a lot of the organizations that they see and are involved in. So they are willing to give to multiple organizations on average. So so it's not like people are always like, oh, I'm only going to give this to this one
Yes.
organization.
Yes.
So I think we're all benefiting from that. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of the different budgets, if
Right.
you will,
Right.
typical organizations.
So if we can dovetail on that just a little bit, our market is a bit unique. As you mentioned, we have many nonprofits and they're very small, but we also have very different segments of our population. We have the year-rounders, we have the snowbirds, and we have the visitors. And I've sat on a couple boards, and that's always been a challenge to how do we reach those specific segments. Is there any ideas that you have there?
Well, I think one of the things, and I was going to mention this as a big difference. I mean, again, I come from a very small country, right? 17 million people. And here is the Cape, 225,000 people. And and again, I'm always amazed at the 3 degrees of separation that is here on the Cape. So relationships are huge, right? Very, very important. Like, and there are a lot of relationships that exist that you don't necessarily even know about. I mean, you know, you might meet somebody in Sandwich who has a connection with somebody in Provincetown, and you know, and you would like, what? How does that work, right? So that's just fascinating, that interaction. So I think the building of relationships is a key part in standing out, you know, here on the Cape. And there are a lot of things that I think organizations can do that maybe they've gotten away from. To give you an example, I made a $5 a month gift to an organization on the Cape, and I was floored when I got a phone call saying thank you for my $5 a month gift. And I had a nice conversation with the lady who called me, and she asked me why I'm giving monthly, and I explained it to her, and I was just floored because, like, well, a lot of organizations would say, well, I'm not going to worry about like somebody who's just given $5 a month, but they said, okay, we're going to do something different. We're going to reach out. We're going to build a relationship with this person, you know, who is giving me $5 a month, because the reality is that could lead to a lot bigger gift down the road. So that relationship building, whether it's like, I think that's one. I think the other thing is, and again, it comes down to some of the basics, right? A lot of organizations are saying, well, I want to save some money, so if somebody gave online, I'm not going to send them a thank you letter in the mail. And the reality is, well, that still makes you stand out if you send a thank you letter in the mail. So every year in November, the day after Thanksgiving, I sit down and I make my gifts to all of these organizations that I support and want to support on Cape and off Cape. And it's frankly appalling to see how few organizations are actually sending me a thank you letter in the mail. And again, it doesn't have to be a very stern, like formal letter. It can just be a card sent by a number of volunteers, whatever it is, right? But not even send anything. You're not standing out. If you want to build a relationship, I think that's a basic thing that I think everybody could go back to. So in addition, in addition to some of the other things that you might be doing, so because it's going to pay back down the road if you bring a donor in and you keep that donor, and you know, and I mean, the biggest story I always find is our youngest graduated from Belmont University in Nashville, and I get his mail, right? Because he's moved away. He's not asking for money, so we're really happy about that. And he's on his own. And there was a story about somebody who had just made $1 million gift. And do you know how they came on board?
Direct mail?
$5 a month as an alumni through a direct mail appeal when they first started, when the organization first started, like, you know.
So as a recent graduate or something?
No, he was a graduate of graduated a while ago, got that direct mail,
Yes,
started
yes.
signing up, saying yes, I'm doing $5 a month, and
Over time.
they cultivated him again. They probably gave him a phone call and saying thank you so much for your $5 a month,
Yes.
and then started building that relationship, right? So there is definitely stories like that, and the same with leaving the organization in your will. I think that's the other thing. Like, you have a lot of older people living on the Cape. Well, you can, ask them to leave you in their will,
Exactly.
and some may consider that, right? So I think especially for those people who live year round. But the interesting thing is, a couple years ago, my husband and I redid our will, and I actually sent a copy of my will to the organizations on the Cape that I left in the will. Do you know how many people sent me a thank you letter? So I sent it to 5.
50%.
No, it was 2 people
2 out of 5.
sent me a thank you letter for making a legacy gift. Is that sad?
That's
or what?
That's very
Yeah.
sad, because that's
So,
a basic.
That's basic, right? Yeah. So I think that's like the one thing that I would like to advise everybody is, like, go back to basics and say, look, we're human beings. It's all about relationships, right? How do you build a relationship? And in the Netherlands, thank you letters are not a common thing. That was like thank you notes. I never wrote a thank you note. You would go to somebody's house for dinner, and here's a bottle of wine or a box of chocolates before you go, right? So here it's like when I got this thank you note tradition, it's like, oh my God, that's so great. So I always send thank you notes. I love sending thank you notes. It's just the greatest thing to make a difference, So
And connect.
And connect, right? So
That's great. You mentioned earlier that we have a lot of organizations here on the Cape that are primarily volunteer driven. And is there anything in particular they could do to help them themselves be more successful?
It's just, again, you want to have obviously a leader that's going to create a plan.
Yes.
So I think that's the key thing is, like, and it's funny what happens when you have a plan, right? And you work it, you will actually be more successful than if you just sort of like fly by the seat of your pants, right? So creating a plan is key, and sticking to it, willing to commit to sticking to it is really important. And again, like having that just thinking as like, okay, I'm a human being, how do I build those relationships? What do I like? Yes, that's important, but it's more important, like what do you think the donor would like? Again, we have a lot of World War II veterans. We have a lot of like people who are older. Well, they grew up in a different time. What did they like? What was special? How can you make them feel special, right? So I think, and you can use volunteers for that. I mean, have a little, afternoon and bring in a pizza and to say, hey, we're all gonna write a thank you note to all of our donors, and we're not asking for money right now. We're just doing a thank you letter campaign, or hey, we're all going to sit down and pick up the phone and we're going to just call our donors no matter what they gave, right? And again, there's research that shows that subsequent giving goes up if they've been thanked, and it doesn't cost you much but a little time. So if you have volunteers, use them for that. Create a little script. So there's lots of scripts and plans and things that I have on my website to download, or you can send me an email and I can send you whatever is you need to work with your volunteers and your organization to make you successful. So
yeah, that's great. I actually downloaded the roadmap. You mentioned earlier about the importance of making a plan. And I think most of us understand, even in our personal lives, the importance of making a plan and sticking to it, and that's how you make things happen.
Yeah.
And it's very simple, what you created, but it's a wonderful tool for the nonprofits. And is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I mean, just like, again, keep doing the great work that you're doing as nonprofits, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Well,
so I think that, and just, I think always be learning. I think that's the one thing, like, I've used that throughout my life, if you will. Like, I'm always learning. It wasn't easy necessarily moving from a small country to a big country like this,
Yes.
but I've adapted and love it. But you have to be willing to be always learning new things, and there's a lot. So
right. And as you mentioned, there's great tools
Yep.
that folks can download from your website,
Yep.
no charge, and help them get started on an annual campaign or monthly giving that will help their organization.
great.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
So if you need my website, it's adirectsolution.com. So
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
thanks.
And thank you for joining us today for this edition of Profile. And until next time, my name is Kate McMahon. Thank you.